Are you ready to step back in time and uncover the rich history of Waterville, Maine? Join us once a month for an unforgettable journey through days gone by. For exact scheduling, look on watervillehistoricalsociety.org under events. During the events, you'll stroll down Main Street and immerse yourself in the iconic stores like Days Jewelers or reminisce about the early days of Thayer Hospital. Discover the roots of Colby College and other first-time discoveries that shaped our beloved city. From classic explorations to fascinating tales, there's something for everyone. Join us for social time, beverages, and light snacks starting at 1:30 p.m. And at 2 o'clock sharp, you'll be taken on an engaging journey through Waterville's past. And best of all, admission is free, and all are welcome. So check our calendars or make your way to the Reddington Museum, home of the Waterville Historical Society, at 62 Silver Street, right here in Waterville. We can't wait to go back in time with you. See you there.
So we have Roland Hallee, our guest speaker today. You might have heard him before for his other talk about the Plains, the south end of Waterville. He is also an election warden, is that the correct title? Yep. The Town Line newspaper editor, and cemetery superintendent for Pine Grove Cemetery. Pretty good for a retiree, right? So I think that covers everything. So without further ado, I'll turn it over to Roland.
Okay. Good afternoon. I'd like to welcome everyone. Can everybody hear me all right? I guess first thing we're going to do is we're going to take a stroll down Main Street, or up Main Street, depending, again, what part of town you lived in. From back in the 50s, 60s, and we made some of the photos touch the early 70s. But this is what downtown Waterville looked like prior to the Charles Street Urban Renewal. Thank you. Charles Street Urban Renewal Project. This is what the downtown looked like. And one of the first couple of things that I want to point out is that right in this area, up there, that's the famous Rotary that was such a big part of Waterville at the time, at the south, right at the bottom end of Main Street and where Front Street met. Now, if you also notice higher up in the photo in the top center, that's the iconic bridge that connects Waterville and Winslow. And what you're looking at now is, prior to the construction that's going on now, was the eastbound 2 lanes. I forget the year that it happened, but then they added 2 more lanes on the north side of the bridge, so that those were the westbound lanes. One of the ironic things, or one of the interesting things about it, is if you're coming up Bay Street in Winslow and you're headed north and you look, you see a cement structure bridge. If you're coming down Benton Avenue and headed south, as you approach the bridge, on the other side you'll notice it's a steel structure. So there were 2 bridges that were built side by side and then were joined together by the median strip. That was done, I'm thinking, in the 60s back. I don't quite recall. And then from there, we'll come up in a certain area, and I'm only going to point this out because it's close to Jessica's heart. Right over here on the other side of the building is where W.A. Taylor was, which was a hardware appliance store, I guess. But from where I lived down in here, we used to access Main Street by going up a set of stairs that used to be there, that are no longer there. And that's the place where we used to go tobogganing in the winter. Now, those of you that were here the last time, 2 months ago, and I kept talking about this hill in the neighborhood, what that actually was almost like the gateway to the south end was, and again, we don't know where it got its name. Nobody knew how to spell it, but it was called the Giant Hill. And it was located right between this building and that building. And you can see it where it comes out down here at the bottom of the hill. So for those that didn't know where it was, there it is. What's that?
A lot of the people used to park down below.
Down below, yeah, there's a parking lot there. Yeah. Yeah, right there, that was the parking lot. Eventually, that became Lockwood Little League Field, this area right here. So this was taken I'm going to say early 1950s, because I played Little League ball there. Farrell Brown, and there was a print shop, a small restaurant there. We'll see some of those photos later.
What did you call the hill?
Chinjine.
Chinjine.
I always spell it Jinjine because that's phonetic. That's the way it was pronounced. But nobody knew where it got its name, and nobody knew exactly how to spell it. But we all knew how to pronounce it. So then, of course, then there's a Charles Street. That's Charles Street right here. The old Morning Sentinel building. Silver Street Service, and became Dead River and moved to Elm Street. That was located right there. One thing that we touched on earlier is next week's speaker is going to be Ken Walsh from the Alfond Youth Center, which kind of evolved. Oh no, I'm sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself. There was one. This is Temple Street, which at that time Temple Street connected straight through to Elm Street before it was entrance to the concourse. On this street, this building right here, anybody remember what that was? That's the old YMCA before it moved on. And I have a little story. I mean, I used to go there. That right here was Dakin's Sporting Goods store, and I used to go there to get my baseball gloves, my bats, my baseballs, whatever I needed. And I always knew that the YMCA was there, and I was always curious about it. But, and I know some of you people may not remember this. Most of you probably do. I hope I don't offend anyone. That Young Man's Christians Association, I think is what it stood for, YMCA. I was brought up in a strong Catholic family. Because this was not a Catholic entity, we were forbidden to go there. So one night, I told my mother I was going to the library. I was in high school, and guess where I went that night? So I finally did go inside to see what it was all about. Any questions? Oh. It was a high school dance.
That's yes, right?
Where was Elm Street?
Where was Elm Street? Elm Street was up here.
Okay, so Charles Street, which is gone now.
Charles Street is gone. That's part of the concourse.
Yeah.
All of these buildings here are gone.
And that church is gone, right? The church on the bottom?
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Over here were all the trees there. There were tenement houses there. And the people that used to work at the cotton mill in the summer was so hot, they didn't have air conditioning. They used to take blankets, they go and lay on the grass there to get some sleep.
And the Rotary?
Yeah, right there. The
Yeah.
person is here.
Yeah.
Those white houses there.
Yeah. The President Hotel is right there.
There's the president. People that live in those houses.
They dared to
work at the cotton
they
mill.
dared to cross
To
the
get
street.
some sleep, they used to go bring some blankets.
It's interesting. It's interesting. These, of course, I'm sure these aerial shots back in those days, because they didn't have drones or satellites or anything like that. So, the general manager of the Morning Sentinel at the time, Howard Gray, I don't know because I was a little bit younger. He had access to an airplane, whether he owned it or whether he rented it.
On this picture?
What are we looking at? Okay, this is Front Street. There's Main Street. And there's the concourse. So this picture was taken probably early 70s. Because the Morning Sentinel building is still there at that time. Here is City Hall. At City Hall. And if you notice, I'm getting ahead of myself here, but down here, that's the head of falls. What it used to look like when the mill was in operation, and Temple Street, King Court, that was the head of falls back before it turned into a parking lot. Here. Okay, so now the Little League field is there, complete with the fence. And those of you that were here two months ago when I gave my presentation here, we're talking about when we were summertime, the boys would get together and we'd play baseball every day at that field. And our goal was to knock out the window in that store over there. No, because most of the time the ball ended up in that big elm tree. And then we had to chase it down Water Street. So after a while we gave up because we only had one ball. So this is the aerial shot of Front Street. As you can see, Front Street at this time is one way. So that's what's telling me that it was probably taken in the early 70s.
What's the big building on the lower left?
Down here?
Yes, what's that?
I don't recall that. I don't recall much about the,
You know what's on it?
because the Wyandotte Mill was down here. It looks like some type of apartment building.
Like a sign on the roof. Like a rectangular sign. Where was that?
And one of the things that I was going to note about this photo, I'm sure you've all heard this line before, where once you get up into a plane or you get up in a tall building and you sit there and you go, hey, I can see my house from here. Well, I can see my house from here. It is located, well, I got to find the Gingine Hill first. It is right in that clump of trees right over there. That's where I grew up, and I now own the house next door to where I grew up. And then you've already noted the Little League field. In the last photo, it wasn't there. Now it's there.
There used to be a boxing arena somewhere.
South End, the South End Arena. The South End Arena used to hold boxing matches back in the 30s, 40s, I think.
Yeah, there was Pancho Villa.
That is given name.
So, no more questions? Any other questions? So now we'll start our walk up Main Street. We'll start on the west side. Well, actually, no, the first picture we're going to see is not on the west side, but that's after this one. That's the old Crescent Hotel that sits right where the new hotel now sits. So, Lockwood? No. Yeah. Never went in that building. I was too young. But so the Rotary, you used to come off the Winslow Bridge. You have to, when you hit the Rotary, you had to go right, and then if you continued right, you went up Front Street, or you could go around this way to go down Water Street. And if you were coming down Main Street, you had to go around the Rotary to get the bridge to go to Winslow. What year was it? I don't know. Silver Dollar would probably be right up where I'm standing. That's a subject for another day.
A little earlier than your time frame, I think it's a
1948 photo. Okay, now we starting up the west side of Main Street. There was W.A. Taylor. They sold home appliances. And that was the very first store. As you came around the Rotary, Main Street intersects here. Came around the Rotary. And that's where it was. The next building over, we'll see in a minute.
Living on the hill.
They actually hung out on over the hill. Yep. Yep. Waterville Hardware was the next building over.
In that alleyway, they found a man that was dead. They didn't know, they never found out if he was a homicide or dead. In that alleyway.
Well, having grown up in that vicinity, and knowing where the Exchange Hotel was, and knowing where the Silver Dollar was, they used to find a lot of people dead. Fill in the blank, yeah. That's where that new Colby building is now. They call it the Green Block, something like that. Art Center, that's the building. Yep. Yeah. Also up on that second floor, someplace in there was Hart the Tailor. I don't know if you remember Hart the Tailor. We're veering off Main Street right now. We're on Spring Street, Silver Street. That's the old Morning Sentinel building. And back in the day, before it was a Morning Sentinel building, from my understanding, was on the up floors was the IOF Hall, and that's also where the Elks Hall was. International Order of Oddfellows. Yeah. And then behind that building was in that same building, but in the back was bowling alley. Silver Lanes, I think they were called. Silver Bowling Lane, something like that. Just to the right of the building, there's a bar there. I think that wasOni's Bar, and just before that, I remember there was a small bakery, and that had the best donuts in the world.
The Oni's bar and grill, it was very popular place.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they took that building down. Colby students revered that place so much that the bar that was there is now up at Colby in the
Oh wow. Well, you'll see it right here. They tucked right in here. Someplace was a small bakery. I think that's Oni's. And then there was a hardware store that I remember. I don't remember the name of it, but I remember it because. Right. And
Back along, further up toward Main Street, there used to be Bradenton's Furniture.
yep. But right here, there was a hardware store. I remember that because I used to walk up there all the time with my grandfather. Whenever he was ready to plant his garden in the spring, I'd go there with him, and he'd buy his seeds and his fertilizer. Guess why he brought me along? After that was Spaldy's Bar.
Yeah.
Across the street from Spaldy's Bar in that neighborhood. Well, first of all, on the corner, which we don't have a photo of today, was Atkins before they moved further up Main Street. And then to the right of that was, I think, there was a pool hall. I think it was Foxy's. And again, I was forbidden to go in there, and I never did. Yeah, that was. And then to the right of that was a State Theater. And then to the right of that was the Greenfront store. Do you remember what the Greenfront store was? You do.
That's right.
The Greenfront store is the store that they referred to whenever they didn't want you to know that you were going to the liquor store. Because the front of all the Maine State liquor stores back then were painted bright green. So it was called the Greenfront store. So. And then just to the right of there was Coder's. It's like a mom and pop market, but they specialized in SS Pierce products, which were very popular at the time. High end was more high end. Yeah, SS an SS Pierce. Cordairs were local, yeah. They lived, what, they lived on a street off Gilman Street. Cy. I think that was a family, yeah. Cy Cordair. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, yeah, you're right. So now we're going to go back to the west side of Main Street after we've passed. Again, we don't have a photo of it, but on the corner where the Paragon shop was that recently closed was Barlow's shoe store. Yeah, and A.W. Larson used to sell appliances when I was in school, especially when I was in high school. That's where we used to go to buy the most popular, the latest records that were out in 45s. Or if you had the money, $1.55, something, you could buy the LP. But the intriguing part of it, about that picture that I noticed was the washing machine. My grandmother had a washing machine just like that. And one day it finally met its fate and died, just lack of a better word. And so she needed a new washing machine. So my father took her to all the appliance stores, took her to Drapo's and any place else that was selling appliances at the time. And she did not want one of them newfangled washing machines. She wanted one like that. They found one somewhere. It was in her house until the day she passed. Now, I think it was, I'm trying to remember the brand name. It was an interesting store anyways. Now, I only knew him because that's where I went to buy my records. I didn't want to walk all the way up to Corey's. Yeah, that's right. Because now that you mention it, I think I played against him once, back at the old Champions. Those of you that were here 2 months ago when I spoke about the Plains, I mentioned the fact that the Plains was a community within itself, self-sustaining. It had everything that you could possibly need in regards to movie theater, a pharmacy, furniture store, grocery stores, pop stores, bars. It was all there. Barber shops, anything you wanted except for one thing. There were no clothing stores. So you had to go uptown. You had to go uptown to get your clothes. And right now we are going to go down Clothing Row. There was one store after another after another. And the first one we're going to look at is going to be interesting because I'm going to add a little bit something to it that probably some of you know. Some of you may even object to what they did. Squires. That was a ladies' fashion store. Okay, we're going to talk about that in a minute. So, yeah, it was a ladies' fashion store, and if you see the sign down in the left-hand corner, it says Fur Storage Vault. All the ladies that had furs that they would put away for the summer, if you could afford a fur, then you could afford to do this. They would bring it there, and it would be put in a vault that was chilled, cool vault, and all of those furs were stored for the summer, away from the warm and hot weather and the humidity of the summer here. So today, I guess if you own a fur coat, you're not an environmentalist or something like that. Okay, next to Squires was Butler's Department Store, which is another woman's store. To the right of that is Richards, which I understand was also a woman's fashion store. Upstairs on the second floor of Butler's was a beauty shop, beauty salon. So as you can see, we're going now down the row of a lot of clothing stores. And then we hit Dunham's of Maine. But in between, I think that's forefront to the left. I think that's the old Emery Brown. That was a department store. Dunham's of Maine was primarily I thought it was a men's store, but I see a female figurine in the window. Dunham's was considered a higher end clothing store because they sold Hathaway shirts. Now, Hathaway shirts were more expensive because they were the only shirts in America.
When the Hathaway was gonna close, my husband wanted to bought one and stored away.
Yeah. And the Hathaway shirts were unique, not only because the person that depicted in their logo wore a patch. They were the only men's dress shirts made by any manufacturer at the time that the cuffs had 3 buttons and not 2.
3 holes in the front.
Yeah, yeah. Diorce's drugstore was next. Tell you a little story about Emory Brown first. Apparently, back in those days, they were a little bit more prudish than we are today. Back in 1966, 1967, when Norton Icky Weber wanted to open a pub in downtown Waterville, he found that space under Emory Brown's, where it still is today. And he was going before the Waterville City Council to get his permit and his licenses. And when they asked him what he wanted to name it, they told him, no. So that's why he came up with you-know-whos. Because he wanted to claim it, he wanted to name it Emory Brown's Bottom. That's why I'm saying times have changed, haven't they?
Wedding picture was taken at Purple Studio. They had to go upstairs. That's what my wedding picture.
I had my senior class pictures taken right up there.
My understanding with Dunham's, it was possibly the first catalog store.
I think you're right. Yeah.
1949. 1949.
Yeah.
And they also sold for women Pendleton.
Pendleton. That was a women's end of the Hathaway shirts. Yep. I'd forgotten about the Pendletons. But yeah, right up there, Preble Studio. That's where I had my senior class photos taken. As you can see, there's a police officer standing on. That was back in the days when police officers walked around. They didn't drive around. They didn't have their own personal cars back then. I can remember when I was a kid growing up, I was so proud the day that I learned that the city of Waterville had finally gotten its second police cruiser. I said, we're big time now. We have 2 cruisers. And they were Nash Ramblers.
You know the date of this picture? I see it's one way.
That's one way. A lot of these pictures I tried to figure out an approximate date according to that car. And that's looks like a 1956 Ford.
But you could be driving a 1956.
You could be, yeah. Because there's no right turn. I'm not quite sure exactly what year they turned Main Street and Front Street one way. I'm not quite sure when that happened, but I think it was in the late 50s. 1959, somewhere around there. Oh, okay, there's Emory Brown. I don't recognize that photo. Okay, there's the photo of Emory Brown. The most important thing we have sold, satisfaction. That's sesquicentennial. Another.
My wedding dress came from there.
I think I see it right over. No. Yeah. Yep. There was another store on Main Street that was a distributor of S.S. Pierce products. Personally, I don't remember that store, even though I do remember it's Days Jewelers. But I don't know. I can't tell. Shiro's? There, right? Oh. And then the building to the far right of the photo is the old Depositors Trust Bank. Now we're on the corner of Main Street and Temple Street. That's where the entrance into the concourse is now. That Kilroy's is no longer, building's no longer there. It's part of the bank's drive-up teller. To the left of there is a vacant storefront. It's for sale. I didn't know what was there. I didn't remember what was there, but I happened to show this photo to my cousin. Probably most of you know Roger Hallee. And he says that that used to be where Corey's music store was. He said the reason he remembers, he says when he bought his wife's piano, that's where he bought it. That was before they moved across the street. But those buildings are now gone because the other building on the left there, the old Depositors Trust, is now the Key Bank. But now we skip over Temple Street. Now there are some stores missing that I remember. I don't remember everything. Right on the corner was a Bee's Candy Store, which was also Fanny Farmers at one time. And then after that was Diambre's Restaurant. Oh, some of you remember that. They had the best French fries and gravy in the world. we used to go there a lot after football games on Saturdays in school. There's Diambre's right there. There was a singer. What's that? They didn't. Those buildings didn't burn. Those buildings were torn down when they turned that into a park. That burned? Is that right? I don't recall. It must have been while I was gone. Because I know they tore all these buildings down to make a parking lot, and then in later years, like we all know, they built. That's where the Colby dormitory is now. So there's a clean store. There was the Singer Sewing sign. I think at one time, somewhere in that area was the old Yard Goods Center. And I'm not sure exactly if that was where it was where the Singer Sewing sign is. And then we had a hairstylist and a hearing aid shop, and then we had Barry Stationers before they moved. Yes. I was just going to say, I don't remember the name of the pool hall, but I remember that Joe's, that's right. It's Joe's? Yep. Well, we're going to see a picture of the Park Steiner in a minute, and I'm sure we all have stories about Park Steiner. That's Park Steiner, but we have a better picture of it in a second. That's where Park Steiner. I think that was an old railroad car, wasn't it, or something like that? And this actually was right on the corner of where the Colby building ends now, directly across the street from Care and Comfort. And it was located there, and then the street continued on up by the library. So that was Park Steiner. There's Park Steiner. I'm going to tell you a couple of stories about Park Steiner. One of them I can tell you is every Saturday night or Friday night after we went to a dance at the roller rink or the American Legion, or we went to one at the high school, all of us guys would meet there. And the lies that were told there were unbelievable. Legendary. They were legendary lies. I have never heard so many lies in my life. Their noses should have been out to here. So anyways.
They came after they dumped the girls, right?
After the girls went home. We always took the girls home first. And then we went to Park Steiner. So, fast forward many, many, many years later, I've been trying to remember the exact year. My wife used to sell advertising for the Morning Sentinel, and one of her clients ran a tour bus service. She had a 15-passenger van, and she told my wife one day, if you ever want to go on one of our trips, let me know. It's on the house. So she looked at her schedule, and we decided that we were going to go to the Sugar Bush in Lake Mechanic, Canada. That's where all of my ancestors, my father's family, and they all lived there at one time or another. So I needed to go back. I hadn't been there since I was maybe 12 years old. So I said, so let's go up to Lake Mechanic and go to the Sugar Bush, enjoy some breakfast, and then buy some maple syrup. So along the way, she tells us that we're going to be stopping at a restaurant in North New Poland for grab a bite to eat from either a late brunch or an early lunch. And we pull up to this place called the Wire Bridge Cafe. And I looked at it and I said, my God, that thing looks familiar. We walked through the door and it was like going through a time warp. Nothing had changed since the 1950s and 60s. Even all of the initials that were engraved in the table, you know, KS loves NG, even though that probably materialized to nothing, it's still there. Another one of those lies. So I had rediscovered Parks Diner. The last time I went by there, I saw no traces of it. But at the time that we were there, they had built a building onto it, like a home, and the people who bought this had it moved from Waterville to New Portland. And they apparently attached it to their house, or they built a house attached to it. The last time I went by there, I didn't see any signs of it, but it looked like the building had been expanded to maybe enclosed. But the Wire Bridge Cafe, as far as I know, no longer exists. But that was any Parks Diner stories? No? We see some blushing going on.
That's where I learned about French fries and gravy.
Yeah. Because some of the guys would tell their lies by how much food they ordered. They were too embarrassed to say what happened, so they lied by ordering, you know, cheeseburgers and French fries. Now we go across the street on the corner where Care and Comfort is now, the old J.C. Penney store, before we moved up to the Elm Plaza. And then Care and Comfort moved in, and also I think now that's part of
J.C. Penney had the overhead.
Yes, I don't remember that. No, I didn't think that. You're right. They didn't have cash registers. They put the things in a tube. Just like Levine's. Levine's used to go downstairs. This one shot across the top of the store all the way to the offices up above. Yeah. To the right there, you see part of a First National grocery store. That later became Jigger's supermarket after First National moved.
Wasn't it Cobble's for a while?
No, Coddles was on Spring Street, very close to where it was before it became Shop and Save and before it became Hannaford. Very close to there, but it was. If you remember when we looked at the overhead view where the old Morning Sentinel building was, and then I pointed out the Silver Street service, Coddles was right next to that. And we're not going to see that today. It's a little off the subject, but one of the things that people don't, a lot of people have forgotten, that next to Coddles was a big brown house, and it belonged to a doctor. You know, I had it, but it's gone. Who? No. Anyways, it belonged to a doctor. And when they tore down all of the houses on Charles Street and adjoining Temple Court, they picked up his house and they moved it. And they moved it to Oakland. Pomelo, Dr. Pomelo. Yep. They moved it to Oakland. Still there. You drive by, you know, that little mall that they have there on KMD. Then there's a turn of the old Oakland Road before they straightened it out. There's a Thirsty Mule, that big house right there. I think it's gray now, but it was brown back then. They actually picked it up and moved it to Oakland. Because, you know, then after the First National store was a Waterville Savings Bank. And then next to the Waterville Savings Bank, you're now at the Post Office Square. So there's the Grand Majestic Elmwood Hotel. That was quite a place. I never went inside, but that's what I hear. Huh?
Wasn't Catholic enough. Right?
Wasn't Catholic enough. The next picture you're going to see was taken from one of these windows right there. That's the intersection of College Avenue, Main Street, and Elm Street. Yep. Yeah. Didn't get our money's worth? Yeah. Oh, wow. Wow, interesting. So yeah, so then you see the fire station as it was back then. You see the old State Furniture Store. And the Metro Bowl, which was up on the second floor with small balls, yeah. And I often wondered every time I drive by there if they ever took the bowling lanes out of there, or if they're still there. I don't think anyone occupies the second floor of that building. There was no traffic lights, no. That was the Sears Roebuck store where that JR's pawn shop is now. Across the street where Walgreens is now, it used to be Rite Aid. That was an Esso station. After the Esso station closed, it was Daryl's Pizza. And then to the right of that was a big building, pretty much where the Kennebec Eye Care building is now. That is where the First National store moved to. They used to have dances, you know? Yeah. Yep. It's a good use, Texaco station. That's where I used to buy all my gas, and that's where they used to repair my cars. I have a little story to tell on that. I kind of feel guilty sometimes whenever I go by there. I happened to be serving on the Waterville City Council back then, and we wanted to expand the fire station. At least they wanted to expand the fire station, and I was kind of skeptical. Where are you going to put it? We're going to move it. And where are you going to put it in Waterville so that's centrally located, other than where it is now? And I said, off the cuff one night at a council meeting, I said, why don't we buy the Texaco station and expand the fire station? And apparently they took me up on it, because, what is that, like $7.3 million later. So, okay, the old Haynes Theater, that theater burnt when it was a fire that took it out. There's a little park there right now. Now, if you notice the marquee,
Where is this?
what's that? Okay, you know where the professional building is on the corner of Appleton and Maine, where Celatee is? There was a building right next to it. Headed north, yeah. It's a little park now, and the TD Bank across the street, their drive up, their remote drive up across is in that area. I was intrigued when I saw Ronald Reagan. I got to find out what this is all about. This is the Army. This is the Army. It was a 1943 comedy musical that was filmed based on a Broadway play of the same name to boost morale of the American soldiers during World War II. So that's a little history on that movie. What year that photo was taken, I don't know, because like I said, that movie, This Is the Army, was filmed in 1943. There's the professional building. You can just see the corner of the marquee of the Haynes Theater on the left. One of the things I used to like about there, our family doctor, Dr. Ovid Pomelo, was related to my mother somehow, and he was our doctor anyways. One of the few times as a kid that I really liked to go to the doctors, especially if they were going there for somebody else other than me. Right in that entryway right here, right there, they go into a lobby like. There was an elevator, fully equipped with an elevator operator. who would sit there and watch and wait for you, and then he'd close the doors and help you go. And that was a highlight of my day then. Again, photo looks like it was taken in the early 60s. Because that car on the corner right there is a 1960 Plymouth. One on the right. One on the left is a 1953, 54 Chevy. The one behind that is a 1930s car. Or early 40s. Might be a 41, 42, something like that. Now, one of the things that confused me about this photo is I remember Woolworths. I used to go there a lot. Yeah, yeah. And just to the Thomas Business College started there, yep. And there was a beauty salon too in that building on the ground floor. But to the right, you see that giant C. I remember a store there called Centers. But I always thought, and I always remembered that Centers actually bought Woolworths and moved into it, but apparently they didn't. And we have Harris Bakery. And I can't remember if it's to the left or to the right of Harris Bakery was the Waterville Steam Laundry. Notice all the awnings? Okay, this is an interesting photo because it's obviously Main Street and all the traffic is headed in one direction. The guy driving that Mercury there on the right, or the guy in the Pontiac, I don't know what they're trying to do. It looks like they're trying. Looks like they both want that parking space at the same time. That's Farrell's bookstore. Farrell's bookstore. And there was Joe's Smoke Shop, Woody's Jewelers, Bernard Poulin's optical store.
You're right about the cars. Not happy, I would say.
That's the storefront of the old Rosignol Jewelers. And that's an interesting photo. First thing that popped to mind when you see that photo. How do you parallel park a horse and buggy? There's the old Arnold's store, W.B. Arnold's. Yeah, because right next to it, that's a 1956 Chevy. So that picture was taken in mid to late 60s. But he's still on a horse and buggy. What's that? I have no idea. It looks like it. Oh, no, wait a minute. Oh, the sign on the front says hardware.
That's the
Hardware Week. It says Hardware Week. So he must have been, obviously. Why didn't I notice that? And of course, that's when Al Corey's moved. That might have been taken right around the time of their grand opening when they moved from across the street to where it was and where it is. Stearns. The old Stearns department store. Before Stearns moved into that building, that was Montgomery Ward's.
Monkey Woods, right?
They used to say Monkey Ward's, yeah. They used to have this, minute you walked, they changed, when Stearns took it over, they changed it, but when it was Montgomery Ward's, again, I used to go there a lot with my grandfather and my father. The minute you walked through the front door, there was this giant stairway that went straight downstairs. Who remembers the wigwams? Made in a factory in Rockland. Because just to the right of wigwams was Sears. I think that's a drugstore, if I remember right. Okay, the building now is, if you're on Silver Street and you're stopped at the intersection of Maine where the Silver Street Tavern is now, you're looking right across the street. This is the federal trust. This is the federal trust. Yes, this is the Levine side. This is the Federal Trust Bank building. I don't know what it is now. I think it was a Camden National Bank, but I don't know what it is now, but it's still a bank. And then you had the Elm City Tobacco Company. And then next to them was Atherton's furniture store. And Atherton's furniture store used to have a hall up there that they used to rent out for weddings and things like that. 'Cause I remember my uncle that worked at Levine's. I remember going to his wedding there, and a reception was held upstairs.
So, can we go back to the, so on the left-hand side where it says Wigwam
Yep.
and Sears, is that later some kind of a cafe or a diner, and then it was Mission?
Well, from here, from the bank this way all the way to Michel's Jewelers on the corner, which is now some type of a shop.
At one time, when I was in the
That
party, there used to be a men's clothing store, Dodge clothing store for men.
Yeah.
Before you got to Michelle.
Yeah, because after a while, I don't know if this photo predates it, but also along in that block you had Gerald's Restaurant, you had the Maxwell's, you had and then you also had the Cairo shop, you had Albina and Delia's. So we don't have, for some reason, we don't have photos of that. But that block from here up to what used to be Michel's Jewelers back in the early 70s, it all burned to the ground. So now, right just off to the left of the bank, obviously there's that little park, and there are the new buildings that used to be GHM Insurance, and whatever else is there now. I don't go uptown much anymore. I can't parallel park. No, I can't. Trust me. I tell you, you had to, right? You had to learn how to parallel park. I just bought a new car. So the guy that was telling me about it says, this thing parks itself. I go, oh, really? Yeah. He says, it'll parallel park itself. So I said, okay, sit down and show me how to do this. So he says, you press this button here, and you press that button there, and then you take your hands off the wheel, and you step on the gas, and then you hit the brake, and then you put it in drive. And I'm looking at him, and he looks at me and says, can you parallel park? I go, yeah. He says, you better rock parallel parking yourself.
And I was so proud of it, this young man with the car doing by itself.
And there's Levine's. That was before the expansion. Because after they tore down the Crescent Hotel, Levine's, then they expanded all the way out to the where the old Rotary was. That was before the expansion. Again, that was probably taken in the 70s. Because I think that is the last photo. Yep. The last photo. But there was one thing I wanted to mention. When we were up at the north end of Main Street, where the Elmwood Hotel, that's where we kind of drew the line. We weren't going to go any further. But a little bit further north of there on College Avenue, across from Drapo's appliance store, is the old American Legion building. And to the left of it is a parking lot, where they extended the parking lot. Prior to that, there was a grocery store there called Samson's Supermarket. And one of the things about Samson's Supermarket, back in 1976, the voters in Maine passed a redemption law. And so the first redemption center in Waterville was called the Bottle Depot, and it was located behind that building in the basement off the parking lot. And I tell you that story because 2 months ago when I was here, I talked about growing up in the South End, and the market in my neighborhood that we used to go to all the time because it was within walking distance, and back then parents didn't worry too much if you wandered out of the neighborhood. The name of the store was Roderick's Market, and two things happened that I remember is when I was a kid, probably 9, 10 years old. How many? It was before I got my paper route anyway. I got my paper when I was 12. We would go out on Sunday mornings, mark the day, Sunday mornings, and we would scour the neighborhood, and we would pick up empty bottles, and we would take them to Roderick's store. You got 2 cents for a soda bottle, and you got 3 cents for a beer bottle. The only thing I could figure why the beer bottle was worth more is because beer bottles back then were mostly all brown. So that must have made them more valuable. I don't know. But anyway, we used to pick up, 50 cents worth, 30 cents worth some days. Some days we got nothing at all. It was an interesting thing. And then one of the owners of the store, your husband Don, he and I got to be pretty good friends. And he's about 8 years older than I am. So I remember one day I was a sophomore in high school, and I was about 16 years old, and he drives up in my yard, never done that before, in a brand new Corvette he just bought. And he says, "Roland, come on, jump in. We're going to Lewiston to a hockey game." And there I was, 16 years old, tooling around Waterville and Lewiston with a guy 8 years older than me in a Corvette. That was pretty good. No, it was a split window. It was a 63.
Roland, wasn't that building Mammoth Mart? Somewhere between Sampson's and
Mammoth Mart was there. Yeah, after Sampson's closed, Mammoth Mart was there for a while. Yes, that's right. I had forgotten about that before they moved up to the Elm Plaza. No, that's where J.C. Penney's is. That's where Mammoth Mart was. Yeah, where you're thinking it was W.T. Grant. Is that what you're thinking? Which store did you mention? Yeah. No. No, before Kmart was W.T. Grant.
Yeah, but I mean the store itself, the name.
No, I remember W.T. Grant being one of the base stores when the Rosenthals built the Elm Plaza. I remember that because it was fairly new, and my wife, of course, we weren't married at the time, we were in high school, but she worked in a little diner, a little luncheonette place in there. She worked there for a while, serving up ice creams and burgers and whatever. McClellan's. We don't have a photo of McClellan's, but McClellan's is where the Record Connection is now and where Northern Mattress used to be on Main Street. Yeah, that's where McClellan's was. They. What's that?
What is that? Yeah, what
There?
is that? Yeah.
There's W.M. Levine.
Oh.
That's
Probably where they started.
That's called the Levine block. I think that Levine's built it.
And what was between the bowling alley and the theater? What was?
Okay. Yeah, there was.
It looks like it's all rebuilt.
Yeah, there's that house that sits there. That was a residence, and also later was turned into apartments because I had a woman that I worked with at the Morning Sentinel who was single, and she had an apartment in that building. To the right of that is where R.M. Tong's office is now.
Yeah.
Before this, I don't know what it was, but that was Whipper's Pizza. It was the first pizza shop in the area. Yeah, how it mushroomed. We got pizza shops on every corner now. Yeah. And then there was some other building there. There was Boothbay and Bartlett Insurance Company. And
At one time, in the 40s, beyond Waterville highway store, there was an alleyway, and then you had a little photo booth. You go in there and put a quarter in. And,
if you're talking prior to 1947, I don't remember. All right.
you put a quarter in the machine and stand there. And
That must have been quite.
photo booth
Yeah, yeah. I remember one at the Elm Plaza. There's a photo booth up there. Yeah. That was quite something back then. Wait, you said it was in the 1940s? A quarter. Quarter was a lot of money in the 1940s.
And the North End, they used to call it the dead rat. And
Get right.
She's talking about a bar. The dead rat. When I was in school, I was known as the Blue Moon. It was behind the railroad terminal. Yeah.
That's funny.
It's if you go down Taconic Street, you take a right. Maple Street, I think it is. It's a dead end street. It led out to the railroad tracks where the rail terminal was.
Yeah.
Okay, and it was a dead end, and there was a bar right on the end of that. And there was, I knew it as the Blue Moon. I never knew it as the Dead Rat.
Classier.
Huh? Yeah, Pete's Silver's farm. Yep. Tried like hell to go in there, but they wouldn't let us in. I go, yeah, but I know Pete.
was always going out of business. Always going out of business, but he never did.
That's why they have laws against that now.
I remember that.
We opened the drawers and down there. Hey, there's a quart of whiskey in there. He was always 2 shades of the wind.
That's all?
He was making it in business. He was
Drinking the profits.
Speaking of Jack Clavin, Jack was a wonderful guy.
Yep. I remember him. Yep.
yes, and I enjoy him. He was funny.
Jack had a daughter named Carol. And Carol was not married.
So, let's see if anybody has any further questions or comments or that you remember that I don't remember. I am done for today.
Remember that? Yeah.